Aeronautics and Astronautics, also the co-director of the MIT Center for Computational Engineering and co-chair of the Institute-wide Task Force on the Future of MIT Education. Joseph Seering is an educational researcher in MIT's Office of Institutional Research. Just a few words before we begin. If you haven't noticed, we have snacks. Also, I would love it if you just sign in on the clipboards going around so we know who's here. That would be great. Whoops. If you are uncomfortable with being in the video, it's best if you stand towards the back because this is being videotaped today. And there are handouts on your chairs which will tell you of the upcoming xTalks later this month. So today's format will be a presentation for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then Karen and Joseph will take Q&A. If you want to know about xTalks, just send a message to this email address here, and we'll subscribe you to the mailing list. So without further ado, would you please give me a very warm welcome to Professor Karen Willcox.
Okay, thanks, Molly, and it's great to see so many people here. So Joseph and I are going to talk to you about some of our work in mapping learning outcomes and topics across the curriculum. We've got quite a lot of slides. I think we'll get through them. We really want to leave time for questions and comments and discussion. But before I get started, I want to acknowledge some of the people who have contributed to this work. So myself and Haynes Miller, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. Haynes, professor in the Department of Math here at MIT, has been a collaborator, particularly on the crosslinks work. Luann is sitting here and trying to hide. She's the whiz that creates a lot of the technology and the visualizations that you're going to see today. Joseph, who's already been introduced. We have a team of fantastic Europs who have been working on crosslinks, which you'll see later in the talk. And Emma is here. Emma's sitting there next to Luann. I don't think Catherine or Kamala. Catherine's a sophomore. She's a double major in political science and physics. Kamala is a senior. She's a math, just a single major in math. And then Emma is graduating mechanical engineering and staying for grad school in architecture. Is that right?
Yes,
in architecture. So a fabulous team. And then I also want to acknowledge ODL folks. So Jeff Merriman is here, and his team over the years have worked closely, and the underlying technology, particularly MC3 that we build on, and you'll hear a little bit about that. A number of people. I saw Peter walk in. Peter, where is Peter? Was involved in crosslinks, and Cole is here somewhere, I know. And I should stop calling people out because I'll probably forget somebody. But big message is a big team of people. Okay, so today, pretty simple agenda. Why map? You'll see the reasons that we've sort of embarked on these projects and what we're trying to achieve. And then I'll talk about the two projects. The first one that we call mitosis, which is mapping outcomes, and then the second one, crosslinks, which is about mapping topics. So before I get started, just a little bit of terminology. So what is a learning outcome? We define a learning outcome consistent with definitions in the literature, what a student is expected to be able to do as a result of a learning activity. And that emphasis on the do, on the verb, is very important as we think about creating learning outcomes. We'll also be talking about a prerequisite outcome, which we define as an outcome that a student is required to have achieved before he or she can achieve another related outcome. So just as we think of prerequisite courses, prerequisite subjects in a curriculum, we'll be thinking about how outcomes at this granular level are related to each other in terms of prerequisites. And then finally, the term a module. So we define a module as a learning unit comprised of a set of outcomes. So you'll see already that outcomes here are our really fundamental unit. And we think of a module as being a set of outcomes that generally is relatively self-contained in the sense that it stands alone and maybe has few links to another module. Okay, so why are we doing all this? Why map? And there are many reasons. Some of them were sort of intentional when we started many years ago, five or so years ago. Some of them are reasons that sort of have come along as the projects have evolved. Some of them are reasons from a faculty standpoint, some more of a student-centered or learner-centered viewpoint. But first up is just to understand and document what we are teaching. Cataloging our measurable outcomes and their prerequisite relationships, and maintaining some kind of a repository for outcomes across the Institute. I discussed some of this work at Harvard actually with VJ, and there was a faculty member at Harvard who made the comment that it's like sequencing the DNA of the MIT undergraduate curriculum. And once you have the DNA sequenced, then you can start to build it up and do really exciting things with understanding how all the little pieces work sort of on aggregate when they actually make for an exciting system. I thought that was a nice analogy. So there's very sort of clear reasons that we ought to be understanding and document what we teach from a faculty standpoint, and that's actually something we don't do. I'll speak we in AeroAstro, but I think that's true generally across the Institute. On the student side, communicating clear expectations to students as to what it is that we are teaching and what it is that we're hoping that they are taking away from our teaching. But it's more than just documentation. We attempt to map to connect the pieces, this idea that maybe an outcome is kind of like a piece of DNA. What is it by itself? Almost nothing, but when you start to connect the pieces, you can contextualize learning for students by providing a roadmap. And in the task force report, we talked about the importance of context and how learning technical elements it's really important to appreciate the broader context, the societal context, some of the ethical implications of what it is that you're learning. I think only when we start to connect the different pieces that they see in courses across the Institute can we really start to provide that context. Connecting faculty across subjects, across departments and across schools, again, this is something you would think we would do all the time, but the reality is we don't. I think faculty, even within AeroAstro, often don't talk who teach nearby courses. I've found my conversations with Haynes Miller in the Department of Math to be some of the most enlightening conversations between he teaching 1803 and I was teaching a downstream controls class, appreciating the cultural differences between math and engineering, appreciating them, but then also embracing them and helping them to make my teaching hopefully better. And then also catalyzing a discussion about different kinds of outcomes. And again, this idea of sort of rolling them up. What does it mean to be a graduate of the MIT AeroAstro degree? How does that relate to outcomes that we're obligated to fulfill at the ABET level? CDIO, the Conceive, Design, Implement, and Operate. I saw Diane sitting here. Diane was instrumental in a lot of that work that went on in AeroAstro. And so that these are different sort of frameworks for looking at outcomes at a program level. But again, mapping the pieces can help contribute towards that. Once we understand what we teach and where the pieces are, maybe this can enrich our ability to revisit, refresh, reuse learning resources, and this is something that I know is of a lot of interest. If we can have modular resources, can we make them readily available, again with context? Can we navigate more easily through related learning resources, particularly as those resources become more digital, more able to be accessed by students in different times, different places? And can this sort of wealth of resources be connected to specific outcomes so that even if you're not taking a particular class, maybe there's a resource that's really helpful for what it is that you're trying to do over here. And again, sort of the map that connects these pieces is, I think, a really important piece of enabling that. To inform our future educational innovations, and I'll talk a little about this when I show you what we've done in AeroAstro, before we start thinking about the future, we don't always, should understand what is the present, what do we have. Once we understand the different pieces, we can do things like identify maybe where modularity already naturally exists, and it's a matter of just exploiting it, as well as new opportunities. Where are the opportunities for flexibility? Where are there pieces that don't rely on each other, where you could offer flexibility, say, in timing of taking a class for a student? Could we be thinking about a future with some degree of competency-based assessment where we really understand what it is we expect the students to be able to do, and our assessment is based on that? And ultimately, could we help contribute towards personalized education and automatic recommendations? At the recent Harvard meeting on online learning, I heard repeatedly the phrase, retail is way ahead of education. People saying it all over the place with regards to personalization and recommendations. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Joseph. You have your own mic. You need that. Yep.
So I'm going to talk pretty briefly about our module. The fundamental unit, as Karen mentioned, of the module is the learning outcome. Learning outcomes are tagged with prerequisite outcomes, which, as she mentioned, are outcomes that are required to have been achieved to achieve this outcome. They're also tagged with modules, the modules in which they're contained, and currently they have the ability to be tagged by subject, but that need not be the case. Modules also have the ability to be tagged by subject, but in the future we're considering modules that exist outside subjects as standalone learning experiences. So briefly, our process, the process we went through to collect these outcomes. We had an initial meeting with faculty to discuss the project and to explore any existing learning outcomes. In AeroAstro, probably partly because of CDIO, a lot of the classes already had fairly good learning outcomes. So in that case, we edited the outcomes briefly and updated syntax and maybe increased granularity a little bit. If the classes didn't have learning outcomes, we went through subject materials, syllabi, lecture notes, P-sets to generate a set of outcomes and worked, of course, with the faculty to edit those. Once we agreed on an initial set of outcomes, we developed prerequisite links between those outcomes to create a tree structure, roughly. And then we created those links between outcomes within the subject and outcomes within other prerequisite subjects. Finally, and this is still ongoing, interest groups of faculty met to discuss sequences of subjects and to revise outcomes and links throughout that whole path. We'll get to questions at the end. So far, we've collected more than 1,100 outcomes over almost 30 subjects, including all subjects that contribute toward a degree requirement in course 16, plus a lot of prerequisite subjects from outside the department, including math, physics, and materials, solid state chemistry. We've also collected a few outcomes from other subjects, just sort of as an experiment to see whether their formats fit into our tool. And we've also made linkages between most of the course sequences in AeroAstro that we're still working on the last ones.
So I'm going to show you a few slides to sort of orient you to the visualization, then I'll pull up the tool. I won't spend too long with the tool on the website because I think it's always really hard to follow along with demos in a room like this. But as Joseph said, let me just go back here. We're going to have the outcomes, their relationship to other outcomes, the module, and the subject. So you'll see, for example, here a feedback controls subject. So here we're looking at a whole subject partitioned into 5 modules. So the major segments of the ring here are the modules. And then each module is further partitioned into individual outcomes. So mousing over here, this particular outcome, which happens to be C.3.3, students should be able to design control systems with eigenvalue placement. Also telling you which other outcomes that particular outcome depends on, which is indicated here by the arrows connecting the different pieces. There's also a tree view that actually came from some of Luann's discussions with students, that rather than showing this sort of ring version of the outcomes and their connections, arranges things in more of a hierarchical tree. And again, this is another way to go and look at a particular outcome here, an outcome using Gaussian quadrature, which depends on outcomes that sit above it in the tree. So that's just another way to view the same data. We could also think about looking, so those are 2 examples that focus within a particular subject and how outcomes are related to each other. We might also be interested in looking at the interconnections between 2 or more subjects. So here, a sophomore level fluids subject, here a junior level aerodynamics subject. So this is unified, a prerequisite for 16100, the aerodynamics class. And so now we see the modules in the sophomore subject, the modules in the aero subject, and the arrows are now representing outcomes that are connected across the classes. And so we can begin to see how the modules depend on each other. And as I said, you could look at 2, or we could think about looking at maybe an entire curriculum, all AeroAstro subjects. So now the different colors here are representing different subjects, where the divisions are modules within those subjects, but we're not going to see the individual outcomes. So I'll pull up the mitosis site just to give you a sense of what we have. And I have to say, Joseph and Luann are an amazing duo on this team, because Joseph, so much of his time and energy to collect 11,000 outcomes with multiple meetings with faculty. And I probably don't have to tell you all how difficult it can be to nail down faculty and get them engaged, but he's done an amazing job of engaging AeroAstro faculty. And then Luann has done an incredible job with the visualization and the interactivity on the tool. And I just kind of amble around. So you can see here the data that we've collected. So Joseph already told you with the 801, 802, 1801, 1802, 1803, the focus largely has been on the course 16 Aero undergrad curriculum, and a few other classes 3091 and the course 6 classes in there. So here we're looking at the MIT-wide view. You can see that we haven't fully populated the database of links across subjects. So we have some of the linkages from, this will be 1803, to Unified and 1690. Those happen to be the 2 classes that I've taught in the past. And clearly there are many more linkages from math and from physics to AeroAstro. We're still working on those interdepartment linkages. So we're looking at the MIT-wide view. We could go in and say we want to look at course 16. So now here's the rendering of all the classes in course 16, again, the classes that contribute to our degree requirements. So Unified is our sophomore class. You can see our professional area subjects, our capstone design classes. That's an interesting thing we could talk about, and maybe the questions, design faculty say, well, it's hard for me to have outcomes for a design class, because it's different. So the outcomes are different, but you still absolutely can have outcomes. They look a little different in flavor, and they still do depend on other outcomes. You can also see here that the linkages are not fully populated. So we've done the mapping between a number of the subjects. There are a few of the subjects out here on the left that are not fully linked in yet. Although it is true that we do have some subjects in the curriculum that sit quite isolated and are not connected to other subjects in our curriculum. And then you can ask the question, is that intentional, or is that sort of the way that things have evolved? So we're looking here at connections now between subjects within AeroAstro. We could go in, and if I say choose 1690, which is a class that I teach, it's computational methods. We can see 1690 is broken into 4 modules. Finite difference, oops. I didn't mean to. I think I pushed a button on the, let's come back to 1690. Where is it gone? So divided into 4 modules: finite difference methods, finite element methods, integration methods for ODEs, and probabilistic methods. And the first thing you notice about this class is that it is actually very modular. This is fully mapped. There's only one outcome that is in this finite. I'm a little bit afraid to push this button. Yeah. Somehow the laser pointer is I won't push it again. I'll point with my hands. There's one outcome in the finite difference module here that's connected to an outcome over here in integration methods for ODEs, but otherwise the outcomes within, let me pick one of these modules to now zoom in on. So there's a lot of connections within the module, but very few connections across the modules. And if you were looking at this from a curriculum design standpoint, you might say this is a class that's actually very amenable to modularization, at least from the standpoint of how the outcomes do or don't depend on each other. So now we're looking within a module. Here are the very specific outcomes. This is what I tell the students when they're studying for the exam, what's going to be on the exam. This is what's going to be on the exam. This is what I expect you to do when you're done taking my class. Define local, global order of accuracy. Over here, to explain local versus global order of accuracy, so there is this definition outcome that precedes that. And I could come into any of these. I can see that there's a few of them. For example, this one over here, recommend an ODE method. You can just see with the number of arrows coming into that one up there, that's a synthesizing outcome. That's something that the students need to be able to do towards the end of the module when they've had a bunch of the pieces and they can put them together to, in this case, be able to pick an ODE integration method that's appropriate for their problem, supported by analysis. So one thing we sort of learned along the way is that mitosis is really, I think, more of a tool for faculty. It's aimed more towards thinking about how you structure a course and a curriculum, and also how you structure your assessments. But I think there is also use for students, and one way that we've used these data and this tool for students is with the explicit tagging of outcomes in the notes and the assessments that we give to students. And some of you may have seen this already in the AeroAstro MITx classes, for example in 16101X. So this is a page from 1690R using the MITx platform to teach the residential class, where every section of the notes is tagged with the outcomes. So as I come in here to do my reading for the day on nonlinear systems, I can remind myself, here are the things that Professor Willcox expects me to be able to do at the end of this section. What I also have here for the students is this measurable outcome index, where all the measurable outcomes are listed for, here's this module on numerical integration of ODEs. I can click on any one of these and get all the resources on the MITx site here that help me learn, contribute towards achieving this outcome, and then also all the places where there's the embedded assessments that let me assess whether I'm achieving that outcome. So again, when the students get to the end of the semester, I tell them the best way you could study for the final would be to go back to that list of measurable outcomes, go to all the assessors, see if you can do them, and if not, then go back through the notes and navigate. It's really another way to navigate the material sort of based on outcomes as opposed to sequentially through the lectures. So I think, did we cover everything on mitosis? Yeah. So these slides here were really just showing what I showed you there in terms of embedding mitosis in the lecture notes. I have to say I really love this. I think this is great. The students don't seem so bothered by it. Students at least say they don't care that much about outcomes, and I don't think they used it all that much. So I think there's the really interesting question there as to why that is, and is it because we don't do that, because we don't make that explicit in our teaching? Because I think when I was a student, I would have loved to have this kind of thing, but it's kind of interesting feedback there. Just to kind of close on the outcomes piece, has the process been useful? Let me tell you about some of the ways that it's had some impact in AeroAstro. So you can see that the outcomes data structured the use of the MITx platform in teaching 1690 and 1606, also the MITx classes, 16101X. We're having a department-wide discussion about curricular reform and also our pedagogy. We've already made some changes in Unified, and those changes were informed. Unified is a 48-unit subject where there are 4 disciplines and an integrative systems component. And so the sort of articulation of the outcomes in each of the 5 pieces and how they relate helped inform some changes already in Unified. We also looked at the connection between that sophomore fluids class and the follow-on junior level aerodynamics class, and there was some content that was moved around and streamlined as a result. We actually found in places in the curriculum there were some things that we were teaching multiple times just because of the way faculty had individually introduced changes over the years, and some things that were sort of falling in the middle and that were gaps. I mentioned we're having a department-wide review. In fact, we have a faculty retreat for the end of next week where the outcomes are playing a major role in informing. And then there are a number of specific issues and opportunities that have come up. I mentioned overlapping gaps between subjects, connections with GIRs. I think this is a really important one. We have our students off taking the GIRs and then sort of arriving in AeroAstro, and it's almost like they start all over again. And so making better connections with what's going on in physics and math in 3091 and the subjects on which we rely is something that we could do a better job with. Okay, so with that, that's mitosis and the outcomes. And now I want to switch and talk in the last maybe 10 to 15 minutes about crosslinks, which is focused not on outcomes but on topics. And actually crosslinks predates mitosis. This is a project that started I think in 2010, initially under some support from an alumni class funds grant. This is another one of Luen's beautiful visualizations. Okay, so here's kind of an overview, and I'm going to walk you through the pieces. Don't try to read the words on this slide. We're going to zoom in on it. But what you'll see is that whereas in mitosis, the central fundamental unit was an outcome, in crosslinks, the fundamental unit is a topic. And here the topic is one of my favorites, eigenvalues, because they're just everywhere. So what you're going to see is that we have 6, I guess, verbs that we apply to a topic. Prepare, relate, learn, advance, assess, and apply. And I'm going to take you through the various pieces, talk kind of about what's captured there, and then I'll show you how that's manifested on the crosslinks site. So prepare is, again, this idea of prerequisites, but now we're thinking about topic prerequisites as opposed to a particular outcome. And this is really, I've got a problem set. The problem set requires me to, I don't know, calculate eigenvalues and eigenvectors of a matrix, and I don't remember how to take the determinant. So taking the determinant is kind of like a prerequisite topic for what I'm doing with the eigenvalue or the eigenvector. Relate shows closely related topics, and if you look at the crosslinks pages, you'll see that there are many topics that don't have relate, but an example might be eigenvalues and eigenvectors, where it's not really a forward and back relationship, but rather a relate. And sometimes relate can actually also contribute to this idea of context and slightly bigger picture understanding. Learn is, I guess it's the central, it's the one in the middle of the page in crosslinks. This is where crosslinks really provides you the map to all the resources, mostly at MIT, but also outside, that we've been able to sort of put together that says, if you want to learn about this topic, where would you go? Now, many of these resources are on OCW, and OCW is a wonderful resource for this kind of thing because it's a stable platform that's kind of designed to archive these resources and make them available and open. So many of our links are links to OCW pages. They might be PDFs in OCW, or they might be videos or other pieces on things like the OCW Scholar courses. There could be interactive things like Haynes's Mathlets, or they might be outside resources. So we link to some Khan Academy videos, some YouTube videos. There are some resources from other institutions that we've actually found to be quite useful, sometimes in cases where there are not good resources available at MIT. So it's a series of links. Crosslinks doesn't host the material itself. It's a series of links that will take you to this modular material that is really targeted at refreshing or helping the student sort of recover knowledge on these topics. Then advance is sort of the topics that would come after. Once you can do eigenvalues, what are all the exciting things that are coming to you in your junior and senior year? I think this one can be really important for student motivation, particularly early on in freshman classes where students might be wondering why on earth they're being thrown all these abstract topics. So advanced shows the topics that follow the current one. Assess is a new one. It's not yet in the sort of the public crosslinks. If you go to crosslinks.mit.edu, you won't see assess, but we have it in a demo version of the site. Again, this is something that came from student user feedback. The students want to be able to test themselves on this topic, particularly if they're using a resource like this to prepare for a quiz. They want to go and have practice problems to try. And so what we're working on is putting in short sort of finger exercises designed to assess the student's comprehension of the particular topic. And this is a pretty timely, I think, time to be thinking about putting an assessment, given the number of digital assessments that are being created across MITx and MITR courses, and thinking about how we could grab those and make them accessible through a site like Crosslinks, I think has really been an interesting question. And then lastly is apply. So apply is a collection of links to interesting applications. And again, this comes back to the motivation, the context for the students. I'm sitting in 1803, there's all this stuff about eigenvalues and solving ODEs. How is this useful in the real world? Maybe for a student, clicking on a link and seeing, there's the phugoid motion of a 747, which is a really important design consideration. Wow, the math that I'm learning, even though it seems really abstract, is going to help me in exciting aerospace applications, can be, I think, very, very motivating. So again, I won't spend too long on the website. You can browse it at your leisure. But this is the landing page for crosslinks. You can see here again the courses that are represented right now, and certainly there is no intent for either of these projects to be limited to these courses. This is somewhat an artifact of where the project started. So we could go to the all topics page, and there's going to be an enormous list here. The Europes have just been amazing. Catherine, Emma, and Carmela working. How long have you been working on the project, Emma?
Since August.
Since August, working and populating crosslinks with data. So if we pulled up eigenvalue, you would see here, so there's the prepare, the learn, the relate, the advance, and the apply. The assess is not in this particular one. So here are all my learn resources. Like I said, a lot of links to OCW resources. If I feel not really quite ready to go for eigenvalues, then here are the other crosslinks topics that we've identified as prerequisite topics, and I could click on any one of these to drop down the learn resources and get right to them for that particular topic, or I could click on determinant itself and it would take me to the crosslinks page for determinant. I mentioned we have a demo site where Luann has the first implementation of the assess, where she has, I think, some of Jen French's assessment exercises that also we're embedding and making them available there in the site. And then I also want to show you one other demo thing, which is this picture. This has long been a dream ever since Haynes and I cooked up crosslinks. At the time, I was in Singapore, and we used to have these late night phone calls. Late night for me, I guess early morning for them, to actually be able to visualize how topics are connected across MIT. And so Luann has got a kind of a draft of this, coming in here and mousing over and starting to see how vectors, matrices, Laplace transform, ODEs, matrix exponential are connected, seeing these big bubbles, I think representing the number of links. Yeah. The bigger, the more fundamental in terms of number of links that stem out from it. Yeah. Starting to see how things are connected. So of course, the graph is incomplete because we're working to populate the data, but being able to visualize things like this, and then maybe even you could imagine letting algorithms going to work and really identifying where things are tightly connected, where there's opportunities for modularity, where should we as a community put our resources? Where are the most fundamental sort of elements of learning that take place that impact across campus? So it could be really exciting to have this data at our fingertips and then think of all the exciting things we could do with it. Okay, so then on the final part, the other thing that Luann has been doing is, first of all, a lot of marketing to promote crosslinks, and then studies to measure impact, and also interviews with students. So I'm going to show you just a little bit of those data. So in spring 2015, this semester, we launched crosslinks to 1803 and a table section of 802. You see here a plot of usage. I mean, we were sitting at 0 at the beginning of spring. I think mostly because we had made no effort to actually get crosslinks out and get it used. You can see here the growth in data. We're at 400 and just over 400. You'll see the actual number on the next slide, and projecting up around 700 for May, June. So this is number of sessions as defined there, visit in a contiguous time frame set to 30 minutes. So again, some more stats. Users, and this is undergraduate students at MIT, 428, with the caveat that they may not be entirely unique, but this is a fairly good estimate. 564 sessions, 3,300 page views. See here, 93 returning users. In terms of editing, not counting the team, 6 students have edited 1.4%, and here's a quote from Luann about the 1% rule, so we're above the 1%. The other 99% of participants only lurk. Yeah, from Wikipedia. What are students doing when they come to Crosslink? So 7 pages per session on average, a bounce rate of 3.5%, and an average session duration of almost 5 minutes. So students seem to be visiting many pages. They're getting there and they're jumping around. Low bounce rates, the students find the content engaging and relevant, useful to visit other pages. This is a reasonably long session duration, sort of suggests that they're spending some time looking at the Learn resources that are there. This only counts Crosslink's pages, so we're not taking credit for going then to OCW and getting to the PDF. I think this is a good number given that Crosslinks is not content, it's a sort of a redirection, it's a map. OCW clearly serves a very different purpose and a different community. It's a different kind of website, but just some stats here to give some context. For the same time period, so this is April, May, OCW has around 6,500 users from the MIT network, 5.39 pages per second, 28% bounce rate, and 3-minute session duration. And we don't intend to draw direct comparisons with those numbers because maybe this says that OCW users go and find what they're looking for in that page and maybe download it and leave, whereas in Crosslinks that's not the intent at all. The intent is to jump around. But again, just to give some context, and I'm really pleased with this number of 400 MIT undergrads using it in a month. That's a good 10% of our undergraduate population that we're touching. Some specific feedback. Students were asked if they would ever use the interactive exercises. Were asked when, if ever, they would use those exercises. So studying for a test, refreshing how to do something, doing their problem sets. Very few said really, if ever, and then the others to procrastinate because it's fun to check yourself. I think we all can probably resonate with that, to help explain the topic to others. So a variety of uses, but I think we know that undergrads use OCW, right, for these kinds of things as well. Students were asked to gauge the usefulness of exercises they already had access to on MITx. So you might ask the question, is it worth this effort to embed the assessments when they can perhaps already go and get them somewhere else? And the answer is pretty overwhelmingly, yes, it's still quite useful. Just the consolidation was perceived to be useful. Looking at it by topic outside of MITx site helps affirm you really know it. So somehow looking at it with a different lens. This is more concise and easier to find, useful because I don't have the fear of wrong submission, so it's really a resource for me. Nobody's going to know if I get the wrong answer. I can't get access to MITx problems if I'm not taking the class, so this sort of addresses that problem of persistent. I will have probably forgotten how to do all these problems after 2 weeks, so good to have them on Crosslinks. It's a little distressing as an instructor, but again, this is a comment I think we all probably can resonate with. And then lastly, students were asked to indicate the preferred type of exercise. Should these be the easy sort of multi-choice, short answer, easy to check whether you're getting the concept, or the harder types? Hard problems only if we have solutions. Can we also get explanations? For a lot of problems on MITx, you can't see explanations when you're wrong or right. I know Dave Darmerful in 16101X did the video, so sort of a hand with a tablet, working through the solution problems. But the students kind of are mixed, although a preference here for the simple, quick concept check type questions. And these are the ones that we're focused on implementing right now. And then just a little bit of qualitative feedback. A lot of insights from students. Students like modularity. I like that things are organized by topics. Students like aggregation. They like to have things in one place. I think in some of your interviews, Luann, you found, how do students deal with this issue of finding things today? They have a browser with 20 tabs and they're Googling everything, looking for resources, and maybe some of them are coming up on OCW, but some of them are coming up from all over the world. Students like the specific MIT angle, and that sort of then gets to this question of curation and almost a vetting of some of the researchers. It's good to know that this has been edited and vetted by MIT people, so I know it's going to be useful for my MIT work. And then students do care about the big picture, even if it's not materially impactful. It's interesting, and I think it must be subconsciously helpful when I'm learning it, but I don't think it will actively lift up my grade, but I do think about how things connect together. So I think it's nice to have that big picture there, even if not all students want to engage with it. So lastly, I just want to acknowledge actually a great deal of support. Both of these projects have been supported by various pieces. We tend to put pieces together to make it work. The Lord Foundation, which has actually provided some significant support, particularly to get mitosis launched and developed. Alumni class funds, which funded the initial development of Crosslinks, and actually we just received a small alumni class funds grant to continue some of that work. The Office of Digital Learning has supported this both through all the people, and I hope I didn't miss anybody, the people here in the team, and also some support of Luann. Also, the School of Engineering and MITSET through some educational fund that goes back to the modularization work that we did. Jeff and the ODL team, I think it's really nice the investment in the infrastructure, the MC3 particularly, which it took a long time for me to sort of understand what, I shouldn't say that, I still don't understand the gory details, but the fact that that infrastructure is there, I think is a really important step towards MIT actually being able to do this curation, collection of resources, and then thinking about the things that we build on top of MC3 that let us view the data and interact with it in different ways. And then I also lastly just want to acknowledge Chad Lieberman, who was one of my PhD students, who was the original actually architect of both Crosslinks and mitosis. Chad has left MIT, but he's still interested and engaged with what we're doing. So with that, and we would love to take questions and hear comments and your feedback. Thanks.
Question about anything you've thought about putting in place to help maintaining these associations once they're created, because as we all know, curricula keeps changing, resources keep changing. How do you go about this? You got so much investment in just getting the first round up there.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think actually the answer is a little bit different for mitosis versus crosslinks. So maybe first starting with mitosis, as I mentioned already, it's kind of evolved that crosslinks seems to be a little more for students and mitosis a little more for faculty. I think that as a department, say as the Aeroastro department, we need to maintain our outcomes for our undergraduate curriculum. We need to, there's sort of a contract with ourselves, with ABET, with our students about what we're teaching, recognizing that faculty may change in classes and that classes hopefully will innovate and evolve, but that we know what it is we're doing. We're making these decisions consciously. So I would sort of view a department as the curator of the outcomes associated to an undergraduate program, and hopefully it's something that you would revisit periodically and update. And just I'm not sure if you'd like to add something on the outcomes curation.
Sure, just a little bit. It seems to have helped to have somebody who is able to reach out to faculty and gently remind them about things that they may need to update or work on, especially someone who has the capacity to wait a couple of weeks to get a meeting, given that they're very busy. So I've been able to do that because of the specifics of my role, but it's good to have somebody around the department like that.
It's a role that, for example, maybe an MIT fellow could play within a department, hopefully prompting faculty who don't have outcomes to create them, right, which is some of it. And then on the crosslink side, it's an interesting question, and Emma and Luann, you should feel free to jump in here with your views, but the hope is that the students would get excited about this and that it would be, I mean, you saw our tagline created by MIT students for MIT students, that students get excited and that enough of them are both excited and brave enough to edit, and I guess you need about 1% to be that brave few, that this thing maintains itself like Wikipedia does. Is that a realistic vision? I don't know, time will tell. We definitely need to keep investing in sort of pushing that now with Europs and with the conscious efforts, but can we get it to the point where it could maintain itself? I think that's a question on our minds. And if you have ideas, or if people have ideas about how one makes this maintainable, and I mean certainly it's an important question for the future. Yeah.
Just to follow up on, maybe you said this, Karen, but how did the MIT students who participated get involved? I mean, did they have to be blessed to update anything, or were they just using, I mean, how did you recruit people?
So the Europs were recruited through their paid Europe positions.
Okay, so they were paid.
The Europs were paid, but the users and the 6 people who edited, who were not part of the team, were just people who decided to edit. So you have to log. So Lewin, you can jump in here with the specifics. But you have to log in if you want to edit. Everything's tracked, so we can always go back and see the edits that were made. In fact, I think if I pull up the site, we'll see who's been editing and what they've been editing. If we go to the home page. It's something that we've also, so here we go. Top contributors of the month. So this is Carmela and Emma, but this is some random
junior who decided to edit it.
Cool, so that's possible, so it's not just paid people then, it would be
yeah, and you can,
MIT undergrad.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so we can see here, this was, again, something that came from some of the interviews that Lewin did, is the students wanted some kind of a recognition system with these points and, recognition as top student editors of the month. We also heard from the students that they were afraid, that's why I said brave, because, I'm afraid to edit in case I get it wrong. What role do faculty have to play as oversight or curation? You'd like to make sure that things that are getting loaded up are appropriate. That we would like the links to be persistent. This is something that we've thought about when linking to non-OCW material, is if it's an outside resource, there has to be, first of all, that it's vetted, that it's a good resource, that it's correct, technically correct, that it has some sense that it will be persistent, that the link won't be broken next week, and preferably that it's a really good resource that fills a gap that we don't have here at MIT, and that's kind of the criteria we've used when we've linked to outside resources.
Okay, so most of the curriculum mapping literature, when they map out things, and I'm just wondering if you do this as well, use a binary relationship between topics or between outcomes, when in reality there are different types of relationships between topics and outcomes, and you can probably calculate, different, like an interatomic potential rather than just a single on-off binary. And so I'm wondering, did you use a binary relationship between topics, and have you thought about doing real calculations to calculate the relationship between them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So strength of coupling,
Right,
not just
exactly,
coupled or not coupled.
exactly,
So
yeah.
the answer is no.
Everything I've read is binary.
Yeah. So the answer is no. We're binary. We're connected or not connected. Strength of connection, it comes in a little bit through the topic A is connected to B is connected to C and D, right? And so there's these indirect relationships, and you saw in the graph the big hubs. But in terms of how closely they're connected, we
You
haven't.
could dig more deeply into the full text of those and actually do a quantitative calculation for how.
Could. So I would say that for the outcomes mapping, the outcomes are already at the fairly granular level of detail, and so they're, I'm not sure that there is kind of a strength knob, but certainly with the topics.
I think the other thing that I've seen as people start to get more and more detailed, as you've seen, is that it eventually becomes intractable to visualize. And so that's the big challenge that I've seen in all the literature, and I wonder if there are ways to think about, how to approach that.
How to approach the visualization, yeah. Well, certainly, even typing in the word eigenvalue, or pick your favorite. I keep using that as my favorite, as you know. But typing in a word and seeing what all pops up and seeing where it is, like I think about biology. I didn't mention biology in our mapping. We haven't done that yet. Biology is a GIR. Is it connected to anything we teach in Aeroastro? It's something we believe to be very important that all of our undergraduates get exposure to. Why? And what is the context it's providing? It might not be connected in maybe the traditional way we think about linking, but could we expose some of those things? Do they use eigenvalues in biology anywhere? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, right? I mean, growth rates. So wouldn't it be neat to uncover those and to reveal them to the students and to the faculty? So maybe we don't have to visualize the entire curriculum, but maybe there are sort of subsets we could.
If I can add briefly, one of the interesting relationships we've talked about is, as Karen mentioned, between design subjects and the rest of the subjects in the curriculum. And we've had a lot of conversations about that, but we're not exactly entirely sure how to discuss connections between those outcomes. And in a given design class is what's required. Is it the whole undergraduate curriculum, regardless of what that is? Is it whatever the design projects happen to require that year? I'm sure you can imagine. But that's a conversation that's still ongoing, and maybe softer non-binary relationships might be a part of that.
Yeah, that's a good example. Mm-hmm. Another one that goes along those lines is we talked about not sort of specific technical outcomes, but say communications. Could you take communications and think about all the places in the curriculum? And in fact, Joseph started some work along these lines. Mm-hmm. And where in the HAS classes, or you take a HAS class, there's sort of this implicit or maybe explicit teaching of communication. How does that then relate to what you might need to do in a design class, and helping again to make those connections a bit more explicit? And again, maybe the idea of non-binary but strength would be interesting. Mm-hmm. Sanjay.
You know, I was thinking about why students aren't using it as much as they should. I wonder if it's because we've trained them to swim in their swim lanes. And all the incentive systems are aligned with, you know, finishing the 8 laps as quickly as possible.
Right.
And maybe this is something that is sort of peripheral vision, right? We don't give them the time to do that.
Yeah.
Whether it's project-based classes or just imagine a class-based one.
I think that's exactly right. That where we do see students using, for example, starting to use crosslinks is if they think it's going to help them do their problem set more quickly, or better prepare for the exam. But there isn't time to reflect on how things relate to each other. But sometimes you don't get that perspective at the time you're taking the classes. It does come later. But I think we have trained them, like you say, to swim in the swim lanes.
Have you thought about the use case of alumni, perhaps, for the crosslinks tool? I feel like actually, so out in the real world, the swim lanes break down. You end up having to think about concepts across disciplines, and so I could see this being an incredibly valuable tool for alumni who are out like in jobs and will be like, oh God, I'm at a brick wall. I can't remember how this would fit, and I have no idea what I need to know to actually understand it. Being able to reach back and be like, oh, I have the entire concept map of the curriculum that I was exposed to at MIT. Would be this incredibly valuable experience. I don't know if the tool was ever thought of.
Well, we haven't specifically talked about the use case.
We haven't talked about that specific use case, but I mean, I'm an alum, and I've used crosslinks myself. Actually, on eigenvalues when I need to look up something for my machine learning work. But you know, that's an interesting.
And I don't know if I mean, this is what OCW does, right? I don't know if do you track alumni? It's probably an impossible thing to track.
Before, but it's been a few years since. I'm actually thinking, I'm talking to a group from the Alumni Association on Friday, and they want to know sort of impacts on digital learning and stuff for alumni. And they go, ooh, this would be a really interesting kind of case to put out there as a possible kind of service.
No, I think I hadn't thought specifically about that as a target group, but you're right. The sort of the refresh, and then along the way you're like, oh, and that's how that was connected. I mean, I remember like teaching the controls class for the first time. It's like, oh, that's connected to that. That's good, and it's like, wow, that's the amazing thing of teaching, right? Is you see how things were connected that you probably knew all along, but maybe wasn't explicit in your mind, and that's where it becomes really neat. So that's a good suggestion.
I was just going to, just coming back to this discussion, I had a conversation with chemical engineering about a year and a half ago, and one of the challenges is this is very atomized, right? You see eigenvectors and you see something else, an isotropy or something. Now, just imagine if you had a skin on top of this, there was sort of a curated walk based on case studies. You're out in industry, control system. It's happened to me in my life, work life. Something goes out unstable. And just imagine if the students could see these things not just in isolation, but as sort of a curated walk through a nature preserve where they see a story emerge. It's like a case study. Just a part. I think it's something very interesting. You do that. Chemical engineering was actually very interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, like a story with all the links back to the pieces. Yeah.
I had a question. Are you guys interested in getting more departments involved in populating the mitosis?
Yeah. So
how are you doing that?
if you want to.
Yes.
I guess every department is different in scope and resources available to devote to this. So yes, we're interested in expanding at a reasonable pace with reasonable support from faculty and a general interest. So I guess we've had some discussions with other departments about expanding.
Yeah, the reality is it's a lot of work. I know. It's a huge amount of work. And even what we found in AeroAstro is that we've got, 90%, and getting that last 10%, in fact, it may never happen because there are some faculty who you just can't engage with. But, even if you didn't do a whole department, there's, I think, a lot of value in maybe picking a few key subjects that sequence.
Yeah, I think one of the early things that we talked about on that project was what does a controls class look like in however many departments across the Institute? It would be really great if we were able to compare that. So even just looking at topics and classes that appear in many departments would be a really great thing.
I wanted to comment that mitosis sounds like a biology term.
It does.
But the thing, I was thinking about the swim lanes and the alumni example. In order to incentivize people looking across disciplines or across these swim lanes, you have to set problems. You have to do assessment that demands that you look across. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, there's no incentive. There's no incentive to look across disciplines, unless it is something that measures that.
I think it's supposed to be the role of our capstone
courses, but
classes, right? Yeah.
I think we ran out of time, but I just wanted to thank you so much, Karen and Joseph. This was fantastic. Thank you.